Hello, there we go. Welcome. Thanks for joining us today. I love that we have a bunch of people in seats and standing. Thanks to those of you in the back standing to listen to us. I'm Megan Schoen. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Shutterstock, and I'm thrilled to be moderating what I think will be a very interesting conversation today about generative AI. This is a topic that is getting a lot of buzz right now, and for very good reason. It's magical. It allows small brands with small budgets to punch above their weight class. Need a high-quality image of an astronaut eating breakfast on Mars? All you have to do is describe it. This is a particularly timely conversation for us at Shutterstock because we just launched these capabilities on our site at the end of January. And unsurprisingly, the engagement has been really, really meaningful. Just to put things in perspective, we have hundreds of thousands of users generating content on our platform. To put that into even better perspective, that means on Shutterstock's platform alone, we have 2 million images every single week being generated. These are images that didn't exist before. These are things that only existed in people's imagination that then they've been able to bring to life in a matter of seconds. We've been talking to our contributors and our customers about use cases. Unsurprisingly, 75% of them know what this technology is, and they have real questions about what this means for their business. They have real questions about what this means for the future of creativity. And for those early adopters, the majority of them are using this for inspiration. They're using it to get rid of that blank page problem, right? They're using it as a starting point. But I think while none of us know the future, we can probably all agree that this technology has the power to do so much more. In fact, some of the panelists on stage with me today are exploring how this technology can be used to create brand presence in the metaverse. Some are looking at how this technology can help detect cancer and cancerous cells early on and automatically. That's powerful stuff. So while we may not know the future, I hope that this conversation today is really impactful for all of you in two ways. I hope it helps you understand what the future could look like and all the possibilities. And equally important, what questions and considerations we should be asking along the way to ensure as this technology comes to market that it's doing it in the right way, in a responsible way. So with that, I'd love to have my panelists introduce themselves. Fred, let's start with you.
Yeah, thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Fred Werner, and I work for the ITU. Now, the ITU is the United Nations Specialized Agency for Information and Communication Technologies, and we're also the organizers of the AI for Good Global Summit that's taking place in Geneva on the 6th and 7th of July in partnership with 40 UN agencies and co-convened by the government of Switzerland. And just thrilled to be here. Thank you.
I'm Sarah Hoffman. I work for Fidelity Investments. I'm part of a department called Fidelity Center for Applied Technology, which is really focused on innovation, what's coming in 5 years. I lead the AI research, so obviously for the last few years, generative AI is a really important topic to think about with what's coming, what does this mean for us, not just now, but in 5 years from now, 3 years from now, 10 years from now.
Hi, my name is Kwon, and I work as business development lead at LG AI Research. I guess not many of you know about LG AI Research. LG doesn't just product the consumer electronics, but now we focus on developing AIs as well. And we station in Seoul, and it's a privilege to be here to share what we do as well. Thank you.
Awesome. So let's dive right in. I'll start with a question for all of you, which is why are you and your company focused on generative AI? Fred, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So basically, AI for Good was built on the premise that we now have less than 10 years to achieve the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and AI holds great promise to advance many of those goals and targets. So anything from climate change to affordable healthcare, education, gender equity, or more high-tech solutions like autonomous driving, smart cities, and of course partnerships. AI can help to advance many of those targets. But the question is, how do we know what is good? So what's good for me might not be good for you. Different countries and different communities have different priorities. And we just can't, if, for example, we were all sitting in the room and we had to decide what is good, we'd probably be here till the end of a week and still not reach some kind of consensus. So luckily, we don't have to start from scratch. We do have the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals that can act as a kind of framework. So these are 17 goals, 169 targets agreed by all member states to basically provide a lighthouse or a blueprint on how we can, at least strive towards a planet where you have peace, prosperity, and sustainability on Earth. So the goal of AI for Good, simply put, is to identify practical applications of AI that can advance the SDGs and also figure out how to scale those solutions for global impact. And that's exactly why we're here today.
Amazing. And Sarah, what about you?
So I think it's really important for companies to be looking at this technology because many of us, probably in this room here, are knowledge workers, and these types of tools give everybody that's a knowledge worker a brainstorming partner. You can use it in whatever part you're doing, whether it's writing, brainstorming new product ideas, any type of creative work that you do to try to think about how do I do this better. And even education, if you're in a meeting and you didn't understand something so well, you can really use these tools to learn in your own levels. And so I do think that really every company now needs to be focusing on generative AI and thinking about what does this mean for workers within different roles, because pretty much every role could be transformed with this technology.
And Jake, what about you? Why is LG focused on AI? You mentioned that it's not something that a lot of people think of when they think of LG.
Yes. LGI Research, our motto or our mission is to advancing AI for a better life. And LG is renowned for a lot of innovative consumer products, also to the making vehicle batteries as well. But now we're focusing on AIs and a lot of different AIs, especially generative AI. We are focusing from the drug discovery to also new drug discovery to also generative AI, which supports the designers or kind of common people to develop more creativity with support of AI.
So you all just talked a little bit abstractly about AI, right, and what it can mean, but I'd love to hear from you how you're using this in your personal or professional lives. Fred, maybe start with you.
Yeah, sure. And what's interesting is we created AI for Good in 2017. And back then, the discussions that we were having, which is, how can AI be, inclusive? How can it be safe? How can it be ethical? How can you be mindful of privacy, security, safety, what have you? And the tools that have emerged in the last 2 or 3 months or so almost seemed like science fiction back then, but here they are now. And of course, using the expression, you should eat your own dog food, I had to be the first to trial these tools in the UN, and I use it in a number of ways. So I organize about 700 webinars a year. So the first one we've been doing is using AI to transcribe the webinars. Then we put those transcripts into a type of chat GPT to create one-page summaries. Those can be turned into blogs. Those blogs you can then use text to video to create promotional videos. And of course, with those 700 events a year, we need to create images and banners, so using tools like Shutterstock. And also we use AI avatars to open and close the webinars. And that may not seem like a big deal, but someone on my team always had to sit there, put on a tie, hello, welcome, blah, 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 and sit there for 3 hours till the webinar was... Now, those avatars are doing that 700 times a year, and now my team can focus on higher value work. And these are basically free tools that don't require a lot of technical knowledge. We're also using more high-end tools, so we're using machine learning for translation in the UN, and there you need to be a bit more mindful because you can't just put member state contributions into Google Translate and hope for the best. We have a lot of acronyms, a lot of terminology, taxonomy. Just things that are very specific to the UN. So there you actually need professionals that know how to build machine learning models, train them, generate them, and continually improve them. But having said that, it's not either or. I would say the best thing you can do is just get started, learn how to use these tools. And I see them more as, there was actually an interesting keynote yesterday by Kevin Kelly. He used the term UBI, a Universal Basic Intern. And at least right now, I see it as an assistant, an intern that can be used in your daily work.
I love that. A lot of those use cases are additive, right? I think you use the word allowing customers to focus on valuable work or creatives to focus on valuable work. Do you really see this as working alongside humans in order to allow them to focus on the things that matter most and have this free or highly accessible intern along their side? Yeah. And Sarah, what about you? How are you using this in your professional?
Yes, I love the metaphor of thinking of it as an intern. And more than a year ago, I started thinking of it in that way also. My background is actually coding AI, and then I moved into this role where I'm really researching the future of AI. And so I wanted to see, could these tools help me? I spent a lot of time writing reports internally for Fidelity, and writing was not my background. And so I've been using it to write my reports. Basically, I have all the things I want to say, but figuring out, what's a good title for the report? What's a good metaphor to use to explain this simply? Even questions to get my readers, what should they be thinking about as they read it? And really using it in each part of the writing process, even to come up with a good structure that flows well. And so it basically is like the intern doing some of that dirty work for you. You still need to know what you want to say. It's not going to do that for you, but being able to really brainstorm with somebody, get ideas on, how do I do this as well as possible to make sure that everybody gets the message I want them to get.
I think it's so fascinating because I think there's probably a lot of marketers and creatives in the audience, and we've all had that situation where you start with a blank piece of paper, and it can feel very, very daunting. And in both of those scenarios that you described, it's eliminating that problem, right? It's allowing someone to start with something and then add their human element to it. And I think that could be really, really powerful. So thanks for sharing. Jake, I'd love to ask you a question. Shutterstock and LG are partnering to, as I like to say, create the next vision or generation of creativity. Can you talk to me a little bit about how LG is leaning in to redefine what creativity means?
Yes, I'd like to share some of the cases we've been developing, testing within LG, also with Shutterstock as well. So if I start with past experience early last year, in February, we collaborated with a fashion designer, Unipark, which is a CEO of a house brand in New York and a fashion brand in New York. And she actually used our XL1, which is Expert AI for Everyone abbreviation. And that actually dramatically reduced the productivity, the timeline of their concept planning and their the timing at the early stage of when they are designing. So actually, it showed that a lot of experts can also use this generative AI to reduce their work time as a productivity-wise. Also, I don't know if you put up the image right now. I mean, LG House Holdings is an affiliate company just introduced this tattoo machine which has a vegan ink. Probably will be launched in the U.S. market as well soon, and they are using our generative AI to make a lot of images, which is can be customized based on your taste as well. So you don't have to put permanent ink or henna ink, which lasts a long time, but you can change every day with vegan ink. It's same as instant cosmetics concept. So I think that's kind of a concept that generative AI can support on this daily life as well. And also there are some other cases, for example, with Shutterstock, we are building, this will be soon launched. I hope it's okay to say it, but we are developing a captioning model, which is a keyword generative model, also with Shutterstock helping to make better search experience as well. And that will be launching soon next month. And also other stuff, let's say, LG Electronics is a big also affiliate company. Hopefully they use this generative AI to, now the high-end devices, consumer devices has displays on their devices. So hopefully they use the generative AI to have more customizable images that can express your moods at home or different types of temperatures or weather conditions, etc. And also finally, at the end, when we were using this generative AI, actually our target was to see how this creativity and productivity can be enhanced based on LG's generative AI. But at the end, we saw that this model can actually work in medical fields as well. And this conventional medical AI models have to use about 100K to 200K images per diseases to create the AI models, but at the end, this generative AI can be used with about 10% of actual labeled images with a better quality. So I think there'll be much more kind of use cases that is building, and we are quite open to other companies to work with us to develop this kind of cases as well. Thank you.
Just a few things going on.
Too much?
Just, tattoos all the way to cancer research. It's really impressive. But I think what resounds with me as you talk about all of that is the immense capability that this technology has to synthesize billions of data points that the human mind cannot possibly perceive into something that's human understandable, human readable. Whether it's as a starting point for creativity, whether it's to enhance productivity, whether it's to help identify cancer cells in patients, right? It's really amazing. So obviously, the world is moving fast. And I think that when we look at the pace of adoption and change, especially for people sitting in this room, it might feel like it's a little faster than any of us could have anticipated. Many of us, I think most of you, were probably not thinking about this or talking about this even 6 months ago. Why now? Why is this something that is taken hold?
I can
Sarah, yeah?
start with that one. So really, for people in the AI field, it's not really, it didn't start now. I would say I started paying attention back in 2020 with the previous version of OpenAI's product, GPT-3. And that's when we realized, this technology has been there even before, but how good it was getting, just based on random internet data, how good this can actually do with text. And then definitely when the text-to-image systems came, that reinforced it. But the difference is really recently, this year, what we've seen with DALL-E, Stable Diffusion, Midjourney, ChatGPT, is that the model of how these were released was very different. It wasn't released with a wait list. You didn't have to pay for it initially when it was released. So really, it was democratized. All of a sudden, I have kids coming to me asking me about this technology, when before it was only people in the AI field. Now it's really anybody at this point. It's open. Everybody has access to it. Everybody's exploring it, and so all of a sudden, everybody's like, "Wait, what is going on here? This is amazing." But we've seen signals for a while now. It's just that now everybody is able to use these tools.
Yeah, Jake, you gave me a really good example in one of our conversations earlier around, how this technology has been around forever, but now it's viewable.
Well, AI technology is not a new stuff. It's been there for a couple decades, and especially if you remember bringing in of the smart speakers, that was actually using AI technology at the back. So technology inside devices or solutions or services, people not get to know about AI that much about it. But now you're using ChatGPTs, thanks to GPT-3, and ChatGPT, also DALL-E 2, and other generative AIs. Seeing is believing it. So if you see it and if you use it daily life basis, I think you appreciate it that much. And I think it's just starting point. Some people say it's still a way to go, but I think it's the beginning of what we call AI as used in the daily life,
Yeah, I think there's something so human about that, right? When AI is functioning in the background of our daily lives, it's not something you pay attention to or that gets a lot of buzz. And yet when you can do something as simple as type what you want to see into a search bar for free and have a visual created in a matter of seconds, it becomes palpable, it becomes real, right? Which is why there's a lot of conversations. But Sarah, it's really interesting to hear that, people who have been in this field, you guys have seen this future and the potential implications of this future for many years, and it's having its moment now. And I'd love to lean in a little bit with you, Sarah, just around, I know you are a prolific writer, all about this topic, but one of the things that you wrote was called Software Development in the Age of AI. Can you tell us a little bit about what that report found or what you talked about?
Yeah, sure. I wrote that a little while ago internally for Fidelity, focusing specifically on generative AI, but when it comes to coding and looking at coding tasks. And what was interesting, especially when you look back to Codex, which was released by OpenAI, and same technology is used by GitHub Copilot, is the technology is really, really good at generating code. And so thinking about what does this mean for future coders? What's exciting about this is right now the technology is not perfect, but you could really get it to write code for you, and you can ask it again, write this code, and you can get a whole different version of code. But that means that the role of the developer changes. You have to choose. Do you want the code that focuses more on security? Do you want the code that's easier to read? And the answer is not going to be the same for each project. You have to really understand, for this specific project that I'm working on, what do I want optimized here? And if you think about our interview process, for most companies, we're still interviewing the same way. It's like write something from scratch. Like, should that change if developers aren't generating the code anymore, but they're choosing the code for the proper settings? Are we even interviewing the right way? There's so much to think about when we think about this topic.
Yeah, I think Fred nailed it earlier too, and speaks to what you're talking about, which is this interrelationship between productivity and valuable work, right? In the case of engineers, they spend a ton of time coding, creating things, right? Literally writing lines of code. And there's potentially a future out there where a machine can help them do that, and we need to rely on their expertise to help us make better choices, right? And drive better outcomes, which I think is a really interesting future reality. Fred, I'd like to turn to you because we've heard all about the limitless future, right? We're talking about developers not coding. We're talking about, cancer research, evolving the tattoo industry, how people design. But what are the things that we need to be thinking of? Why does AI for good exist? What are the considerations that need to be top of mind?
Yeah, so probably one of the most interesting parts of my job is, we get all these use cases presented to us almost daily. So, whether it's creative tools like text to image, text to video, or tools that could be used for accessibility, so maybe turning audio into sign language, or, we have a lot of healthcare applications, so using a mobile phone to detect skin cancer, or scanning your eyeball to predict heart disease or diabetes, countless use cases. But, it's one thing to develop an app in Silicon Valley or in Shenzhen, China, but it's another thing to roll out that app across 50 African countries with all the challenges that entails, whether they be political, social, environmental, sometimes even basic things like power, electricity, is something tamper-proof. So basically, we need to be having a conversation when you're developing these tools. Do they work equally well on men and women, or on the elderly, on children, or on people of different skin colors, or with people with disabilities, or in low-resource settings in the least developed countries? So these are not questions that occur naturally to the fast tech startup industry or the, it's more like build it and we'll fix it later. But these are things that people think about deeply at AI for Good. And this is important because you need to create a kind of common framework of understanding where if you're going to connect AI innovators with problem owners, and a problem owner could be a mayor, someone in a hospital, so someone, an NGO, a teacher, how can they actually engage with these innovators and understand these tools and models and build them in a way where data sets are inclusive, you're mindful of things like gender and disabilities and where people live. And right now there's a digital divide, there's a digital gap. And as useful as these tools are, I feel like I have 10 interns in my pocket. That's amazing. But that's just going to increase the digital divide to the people who don't have it, or they may have a feature phone that doesn't have the power to work with these apps. So these are things that people are working on at AI for Good, and they've been working on it for a long time. And I think it's good because if you went back to the 90s, to the dot-com boom, these aren't questions that people were asking. When people were putting up websites or selling pets.com for $10 million, they weren't thinking, what about online abuse or bullying or self-image or inclusivity or participation? It just wasn't part of the dialogue, but it is now. But having said that, AI is infinitely more powerful than pets.com. So I think it's really good that we're having this discussion now. And that's basically what we're discussing at AI for Good. And there's been a lot of work going forward. And even when I hear the discussions happening at South by Southwest, you see people are thinking about these things. And they're doing their best. They don't have all the answers, but it's definitely part of a narrative and, for good reason. So here we are.
And do you think what you described will actually be an impediment for this scaling globally? Obviously, you're positioning AI for good to help solve and answer some of these questions, but how solvable are they, right? Your example of how this technology can manifest itself in impoverished areas so that everyone has equal access. Do you think that this is a technology that will scale if, I don't want to use the word governed, but if, having the right considerations along the way?
I think it can scale, and having said that, the biggest bottleneck is it's not the technology, it's not AI, it's data sharing, it's data. So, I can't tell you the amount of meetings I've been at where we're talking about, okay, let's share data on skin cancer so we can develop this app and deploy it across the world at scale. And then you'll be in the meeting room, okay, who has data? All the hands go up. Oh, we have so much data. Who's willing to share data? And then everyone's looking at the floor, and this happens over and over again. And there's good reason for that. I mean, data has value. It exists in silos. They don't want to share it. So what we're trying to work on is basically data sharing, privacy-preserving data sharing techniques. So there are ways to share data in a way that is useful, but where you still keep the integrity of the data and the privacy of the data. And I think until that piece of a puzzle is solved and solved at scale, you're not going to have this sort of global AI for good problem solving happening at scale. So if anyone has the solution to that, please come see me after the panel.
Well, and I think data is at the heart of all of this, right? And I think it's one of the concerns and questions that gets raised very frequently. Just today I was having a conversation with someone at our booth because they had someone come over and do a generative query, and the results were not diverse and representative. And the question was, well, why is this not diverse, right? If I query for a CEO sitting at a conference table, why am I getting all white men? And it's a really hard question to answer, right? Because the outputs of this technology are only as good as the inputs. And so I think it speaks to the content, in our case at Shutterstock, a lot of the content we get from contributors that's tagged with metadata like CEO and boardroom also are white men. And so I think there's something that is really interesting about this technology too, and that it can actually help break down some of those impediments if we apply the right humanness to it. So one of the things we're working on is when someone types in CEO in a boardroom, we can actually offer a translation layer that adds terms and words like diverse or female. So the results that we get out as a starting point look like the world, not just look like the data that was input into the system. So on that note, I think we've talked about some of the implications, but Jake, I'd like to turn it over to you because we know this technology is here. We just talked briefly about some of the ethical implications that we need to keep in mind. LG is a trusted company worldwide. I think most people have some sort of LG product in their kitchens, maybe in other places. And you are obviously making a significant investment in AI. Do you believe that this technology will soon become a part of daily life?
Yeah, I think so. I hope so. Because, to the point that you mentioned just before ago, I think we use the term designed by human, created by AI. So what you design, what you input, actually is created by AI or output by AI. So I think just using that terminology and get ready for the future, I think future is not that far away, but with things that is being delivered to your daily life, I think you'll have best usage of AIs, especially, not just the washing machines or refrigerators whatsoever, but there's new devices which you can actually leverage the AI technology in your life as well. And LG will work for not just the conventional AIs, for especially generative AI, working partner with the Shutterstocks. I think we can deliver better AI technology, and I think in the second half also we will deliver some other good stuff that with the Shutterstock, especially for design kind of creative toolkit that uses our XL1 model as well.
Sarah, Fred, can I ask you the question as well? Do you think this technology is going to be a part of how we operate? I know you mentioned it's like having an intern, but how do you see this becoming a part of everything that we potentially do?
So yeah, I do think it's going to be part of everything. We do have obviously a lot of ethical considerations that we need to figure out, but hopefully we could mitigate some of these issues, and I think it will be part of everything. And I'll share something we did a year ago. We hosted a company-wide no-code challenge to see, this was after I wrote that report on how software development was changing because of AI. We wanted to see, like, could people who don't have any coding background really pick up some of these tools and create something? And what was fascinating is we had 700 employees from across the company, all different roles, different business units, actually creating proof of concepts that for something that they wanted to see, but never had a way of really showing what they would want to see in their role. We partnered with our Women in Technology group, and one person actually went over afterwards to the head of the Women in Technology group and said, I always had these ideas, but I couldn't participate in hackathons because I didn't know how to code, and I finally feel like now there's a way that I could show my ideas, because you could talk about it, but it's really not the same as being able to create a proof of concept. And that's just one way that I think that really these types of tools just open the doors for more people to be able to really be part of whether it's creating products or something else. More people can really be able to innovate in creative ways now.
I think that's so amazing, because you think about this concept of democratization of creativity, right? I think that at one point in history, you needed to know how to use a camera in order to take a photo and share your vision of the world, right? Then everyone had a camera on their phone, and all of a sudden you're seeing a diverse perspective from a variety of humans because it was accessible. I'd love to just spend some time there. How do you guys think about how this opens up new opportunities for humans to express themselves without having to have the right tools or the right training in order to do so?
I mean, I had some experience talking with this top-notch design school in New York, and these professors were having discussions is that when we had art that was specified to describe certain aspects which you see daily life, then when the photo machine, the camera came out, they tend to think more artistic ways or more creative ways to design some other things other than describing what you see. So the photo, actually, the camera took over what you see. Then now here's the AI. I don't know where it's gonna move towards, but hopefully AI also supports somewhere that these drawings and also the photos now are somewhere in the artistic area. I think hope AI can transform or go there. I don't know, but it will be some tool to be humans to use it, and hopefully our people use the AI correctly and productively to use your creativity at most.
Yeah, Fred, you shared an anecdote at lunch just about the evolution of painting. I thought it was so fascinating, if you wouldn't mind sharing it here.
Yeah, definitely. So I do have some artists and creatives on my team, and I'd say the room is split in two. You have half the room who's excited about this, like, wow, now I can do more. Like you said, the blank sheet of paper, I'm not staring at it for 5 minutes. I can get started. To be honest, the other half of the room was quite offended. And I mean, like, their feelings were hurt. Like, why are you thinking about this? Like, am I not good enough? And so I wouldn't take it for granted that people are just going to jump on board and adopt these tools. If you are going to try it in your organization, maybe think carefully about how you socialize it and sensitize people to it. I think they will come around. But that wasn't actually the story. So the story was about creativity, right? And if you go back about 200 years or so, you had portrait painters. So if you could afford it, your family would hire a portrait painter, family of you, your grandfather, the kids, and they'd spend days painting. And you probably had tens, if not hundreds of thousands of portrait painters. And then the camera came along and effectively put them out of work, because why would you hire someone to paint a portrait when you can take a photorealistic photo? But at the same time, all those painters, it actually triggered them to think about art differently. Okay, so if we're not needed to do this anymore, what am I going to do with my paintbrush? And you could say that kind of triggered the advent of modern art. And then you had, Dali, Picasso, Kandinsky. I mean, could you imagine a world without Dali and Picasso? So I think AI might do the same to different creative domains or different industries even. I'm a musician myself. I'm kind of hoping it might create the next Jimi Hendrix out of thin air. Who knows, So in that sense, I'm optimistic. But I think that the real opportunity lays in, we just reached the point a few years ago where more than half of the world is connected to the internet. That's online, right? And as good as that is, that's basically half the world that still, we're not benefiting from the collective creativity and problem solving, the knowledge, the storytelling of almost half the world. So that's almost like a V8 engine only firing on 4 cylinders. And funnily enough, it's not coverage or internet access that's the problem. It's, in many cases, there's good coverage, but there's just no incentive for people to move online because, you have almost 7,000 languages and dialects. There's people can't read and write. There's all types of bottlenecks that need to be solved. But I do think that generative AI could be used in a creative way to incentivize people to go online. If all of a sudden it doesn't matter if you're literate or illiterate because you have speech to text, text to speech, sign language, you could maybe just say something and create a video. And all of a sudden these people could participate in the creative, I don't want to call it economy, the creative community, if you will. And for me, that's where the real opportunity lays. So if you could really use generative AI to move more people online and benefit from their collective creativity and problem solving, then you might find the next Jimi Hendrix. It might not necessarily be here. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. It makes me think of a story. One of the women on my product marketing team has 2 young children. And when we first brought this technology to market, one of the things that she did was she had her 7-year-old son describe what he was imagining into our Generate to see what that would look like. So you talk about this democratization. Think about children. How many amazing stories have you heard from creative children who were thinking about worlds in ways that as adults we're not even fathoming? And now we can bring something visual to life just by the words they're using to describe it. I think that's a really interesting future as we think about how creativity can be accelerated, how it can evolve with the help of some of this technology. So I'm going to go a little off script, sorry, because we have a few questions left, but I'm sure that there's a lot of questions in the audience. So I'd like to, see hands already, open. So let's get started with Q&A, and then if we have time at the end, we can get to the rest of our regularly scheduled programming. She's bringing a mic around.
Hi, thank you for the session. Great to know that most brands are already into it, and there are a lot of happenings before we know. So I'm most interested in the consumer-facing AI-generated content about brands, assets of creative audiovisual assets, and also help desks or whatever AI speaks to the consumer directly. Is there any filter mechanism for the AI's output when the consumer meets the output? Is it in place, like any human resources auditing the AI output now? Or do we 100% believe that the output is always safe and sound and to the right target?
Anyone want to take that? Did you guys understand the question?
So today there's generally, if you really want to scale this technology, it would be really, really hard to have a human in the loop in real time because you can't reach out to thousands of people. But that doesn't mean that this technology is safe because it's going directly to customers in some cases. And so you really do need to think about, when and how you could bring this technology directly to people, knowing that there are issues with it today. There is misinformation. It could say something completely not true. And so depending on, you might need to think about exactly how are you going to use this technology. You could do it with a human in the loop, but that's definitely much more expensive and more challenging, but then you could have, it could still save time. Instead of letting a human answer every question, they could just verify, hey, there's nothing incorrect here. Or in use cases where you feel like, okay, the risk is very, very low, maybe in those cases you could send the answer directly. But it's really based, every company and every situation handles this differently, because there are still a lot of issues with this technology and you definitely can't trust it.
I would just add, just to give you a tangible example of some of the stuff that we're doing at Shutterstock to address that concern. As I said before, the outputs are only as good as the inputs, right? And the inputs are flawed, they're biased, right? They're not always conscientious. And so one of the things that we're doing is actually applying logic between the input and the output that allows us to filter for things like hate speech. It allows us to ensure that if we're going to only return 4 generated results, that we're generating results that are diverse, right? That we're mitigating bias. And that's a lot of logic that is technology, it's not humans, that we're applying to help get to the place where you're generating visuals that are representative, that are inclusive, that aren't violent or full of hate. And I think that's where a lot of the industry is going to lean, is how can they apply that logic on top of these base models? Thanks for the question. Anyone else? Yeah.
Thank you. I work for a creative agency in the healthcare space. You guys touched on this topic, which I think is kind of the elephant in the room, which is, does this technology replace or augment? Whether it be a designer or a developer, anyone in the creative space. Love to hear your thoughts.
Did I understand correctly? Is it going to replace human? Is that the question?
Yeah, or augment.
Well, I think the editor guy from The Wire last week, I think, mentioned that is there any actually proven records of AI replacing human yet? Maybe yes later, but for LG, I think our target is not to replace human totally. No, we are trying to support what human can do more productivity-wise and give them time to focus on more areas that is more value. For example, doctors right now, when you see the actual X-ray charts, you have to focus on you have to have at least 10 years of experience to see where these disease symptoms are correctly. But if you use AI, it's already there that gives same eye level from 10 years of experience of doctor level. So I think that gives you a lot of confidence level to the patients as well. And I think there's a lot of different ways to use this AI properly. And I think, nope, I think it's not going to replace the human. There will be some areas like AI contact centers as well. We are developing solution for AI contact center as well. It supports the contact center, the people who are working there, to give them more optimized the summary of customer who are calling to the contact center to complain about previous devices they purchased. But actually, you see the records, so give them more kind of plus effect to the customers who are complaining. At the same time, they recognize that what you're complaining about. So what I'm trying to say is that we think that it's not going to replace human being, but it'll give more support human being to live more human than ever.
One thing I would add to that is going back on the example we talked about earlier with artists. If you're an artist who says, no, I'm only doing family portraits, yes, you probably lost your job. But if you were an artist who said, let me think about more kinds of abstract type of painting I can do, you had a job. And I think we need to think of it the same way today. If you're somebody who's like, no, I want to do my role the exact same way I've always done my role, then yes, you probably will be replaced. But if you're somebody who figures out, how can I do my job even better? How can I use these tools to be better at my job? Then, your role is augmented. You're doing better, but you're definitely not being replaced. But we do need to think about how we can embrace the tools instead of being scared of them.
I'd like to add one more mention to what Sarah said, is that, let's think of this way. For example, AI, just generative AI, by the common people, they don't have skill to design or art, drawing skills like designers or artists. But you have your creativity in your heart or your mind already. You want to use AI to get your skills like professional designer or artist supported by generative AI. And I think also at the other end, expert designers or artists can also get benefit from then getting the conceptual stage faster and better to have, because designers, professionals, you have to have productivity on your hands to get early to the market than competitors. So I think that both areas, whether it's a common people or you have expertise areas, I think will benefit from the AIs, not replace it. Hopefully this answers to your questions.
I'm going to add something I may regret adding because it could open a can of worms, but let's do it. It's South by Southwest. I think all of this begs the question, what is art? And what I mean by that is, to me, art is human perception, interpretation. That exists with this technology, right? Even the way that you're describing what something can become, that's a reflection of you. It's a reflection of your imagination. Taking that output and transforming it into something that only you see through your eyes, I think that's the magic. And I'd be very surprised if there's a world in the future where we can decouple that from humanity and lean on only technology. I think those two things have to exist together. Other hands, lots of hands.
Hi, great panel. I think the other elephant in the room is IP rights.
Oh, yeah.
How are you thinking about that, and how do you protect the artists?
Yeah, I can start. We spend a ton of time at Shutterstock on this exact question. If you think of our 20-year history, we have built a two-sided marketplace with two fundamental customers in mind, right? Customers, creators who are going to take something and download it, and contributors, the artists who are uploading their content. And for the last 20 years, not to oversimplify it, but I think we've had two missions. One, we have to bring the best creative ingredients to our customers. We have to bring innovation to them. And two, we have to help our contributors monetize their content. That's why they're bringing it to us. They're not bringing it to us because they want to display that content in a gallery. They're bringing it to us because they want to sell that content. The way that we've approached this at Shutterstock is we actually pay royalty payments on generative content and recognize the collective nature of this content, right? There's billions of data points that go into producing an output. The way that we handle this is when we form these partnerships with LG or OpenAI, we actually pay a royalty as a result of those deals into what we call the Creator Contributor Fund. Secondarily, whenever a piece of content is generated and downloaded on our platform, we pay a royalty to that contributor fund just like we would direct to contributors. That's incredibly important to us because our marketplace, our business model does not exist if we're not inextricably linking supply and demand, creator, artist, contributor. And so we've been really thoughtful in how we've approached that to ensure that whether this is 50% of content budgets in the future or 5%, that our contributors will have the ability to continue to make money off of their content in a variety of ways on our platform. So something I'm just mildly passionate about and is very unique to Shutterstock right now. I think we're the only company in the world that's created this ecosystem today that truly connects generative outcomes with contributor compensation.
And maybe if I could just jump in, I think what's so interesting about the Shutterstock image generation use case is I do believe there is a future in human-machine collaboration, and virtually everyone in this room, whether you're an artist, a doctor, an accountant, lawyer, philosopher, whatever, you're going to be collaborating with machines, with AI in one way or another. And what's so nice about this use case is that you can actually point to it, you can see it, and you can imagine the whole thought process behind it. And it's not an easy puzzle to solve. So on the one hand, you're like, okay, this is great. You have these creators uploading photos. You can generate new types of photos or images and democratize access to that. But all of the things you just said, all of those questions that need to be answered, you're going to have to answer those questions, whether you're talking about scanning X-rays for lung cancer or generating car designs or maybe generating financial reports or whatever these tools are going to be used for. And that's why actually Shutterstock's going to come to the Global Summit in Geneva in July. And we're going to use this use case. It may be a microcosm of everything that's possible in the world, but I think it's a a very good one because, first of all, you're thinking about it carefully, thoughtfully. It may not be the perfect answer. It may not be the perfect approach, but it's a start, and it's so new. I mean, this is 2 months old. We're even joking at lunchtime that everything we say on stage might be completely irrelevant in 3 days when ChatGPT 4 comes out, and then you guys are full of it, you know? So this is how fast things are moving. But the intent and being that thoughtful about it, those are the kinds of questions that need to be answered and thought about, whether you're talking about images, about text, about design, about legal documents, whatever. So I'm glad it's a good start here, and I saw a few hands clapping in the audience, so it may be the start of a good pathway. Yeah.
Other questions?
Hey, thank you for the chat. Forgive my long question. Black box paradox is like people put an input, but they don't know why the output came out. I think the flip of the creative director's question for me is, we're experts. The painter that paints portraits that goes on to move and does something else, he was already an expert. He knows how to paint something new. I'm wondering what you're doing to protect the value of expertise for people who can put an input in and get something very complex back, but they don't know anything about it, and they're selling it like they're an expert against people who are actually experts, spent a lot of time educating ourselves about why what we're looking at, or why the code is good or bad, or why it may cause further problems. What are you doing to protect against something like that?
Well, I could give one specific example. So in the healthcare domain, if you put a drug to market, it has to go via FDA, it might take 10 years, $10 billion or whatever it costs. There's a lot of oversight. And at the same time, you have a lot of high potential AI health apps going up on the App Store every day with, I think there is oversight, but it's more from a technical perspective. Is this app following whatever guidelines, right? And if you're, let's say you own a hospital or you're a minister of health in a certain country, and you need to get to a point where, okay, these apps, they have huge potential, but how do I know I'm comparing apples with apples, oranges with oranges? So at the UN, we created, out of AI for Good, an AI for Health focus group with the World Health Organization and ITU, and they're working on a benchmarking framework for the testing and evaluation of AI for Health applications, so that when you do have these AI for Health apps coming your way, you are able to at least benchmark them against each other in terms of performance, make sure the data sets are inclusive, and then create a kind of sandbox environment where you can do benchmarking and best practices. Now, that maybe doesn't answer your question totally, because this would need to happen across probably 1,000 industries at scale to solve what you're talking about. But it is something a lot of people are thinking about it. It's also, if you're looking, there's been a lot of ethical guidelines being released from like UNESCO, the OECD, you have the EU AI Act. I know in the US they're talking about it. And the explainability of AI is a key component of that. So one way or another, people are going to have to figure that out, whether it's through benchmarking or through comparison, and the explainable AI thing, it is actually possible. It's just hugely difficult and expensive and costly to be able to do that. So you can kind of reverse engineer a result, but you're not going to do that every time you get a customer complaint. I mean, that's just impossible. So that's something that definitely needs to be solved on, but at least in the context of the UN and AI for Good, that's one piece of a puzzle that we are working on.
And let me offer another lens for you that might be helpful. And it speaks directly to our product roadmap and some of the things that my team is trying to solve right now. This technology, I'll say it again, is only as good as the input. So it's based on training data, and a lot of times that's created by artists, right, who are tagging their content and images with very specific terms that only creators or artists or photographers understand, right? Whether it's the lens used or the lighting used or some of that very industry-specific terminology. That's almost limiting in a way, right? Because the best outputs from this technology are going to come when you have a professional creator who can describe the exact thing that they want to generate. And people, the every person, don't necessarily understand that in order to get an amazing generative output, they need to talk about the depth of fields or the lighting overhead. And so one of the things that we're trying to solve at Shutterstock is how can we take something as simple as the word cat and turn this more into a workflow versus just a search to help anyone get to the right outcome based on how we know the technology works. Because we don't want this to only be used by professional photographers. We want there to be transparency around, here's the types of words, here's the types of things that you should include in order to get a great output without having to be a prompt engineer, which is also a new field, right, of people who know how to work with this technology. So it's not an easy problem to solve. I think that we'll have some interesting things coming to market in the next few months that will make this much more transparent around what are the types of things that you should do to generate the best outcomes. Yeah. I think here.
First of all, thank you for this panel. I'm so excited about your thoughtful approach to how you're doing it with your site. My question is, how are you thinking, or how did you approach communicating to your photographers about training the data set? Like, was it opt-in, opt-out? How did you communicate it to them? And like, what was the feedback? Because I'm launching a podcast on called Creativity Squared, how creatives are collaborating with AI. And immediately everyone's like, what's the licensing? And, has the very strong reactions to it. So I'm curious how you approached that and communicated it and your community's reaction.
Yeah, great question. I'll spare you the legalese answer, which no one actually cares about in this forum, right? Whenever anyone uploads content on our site, we make it really clear that it's our job to ensure that we can sell it wherever we need to sell it to help you make money, right? That is why I said people aren't coming to our site to display their art in a gallery. They're coming to monetize it. So legally, of course, from the outset of our business, this type of use case has been covered. More importantly, we've done a really good job of making this as transparent as humanly possible. The first time we started endeavoring to do these types of deals with LG, OpenAI, Meta, we posted to our contributor knowledge forums about the implications of this, why it matters, things to be, considering as we step into this new monetization channel. We've launched opt-out functionality so that contributors can go into their account and say, I don't want to be a part of this, and thoughtfully opt out, in which case we don't share their content or data. But again, from a response perspective, we've got resoundingly positive feedback. If you think about our asset library today, we have over 600 million assets in our library. Not all of those get sold. So we have contributors who are uploading their work and have never made $1 on Shutterstock. Now all of a sudden, they have the opportunity to make money because of this technology, because of the way that we're doing these deals, because it's not about just how effective you are at direct selling to a consumer. If you upload 1,000 photos and we engage in a partnership and sell those photos, or someone downloads a piece of content, those are now making money for you, which is fundamentally why they're doing business with Shutterstock. Other questions? Yeah, up here in the front. You're getting your steps in back there.
Thank you very much for the explanation as to the contributors. It's really brilliant to know that you're offering them an incentive. And I was just wondering, you have loads of beautiful images behind you there, and you talked about the different prompts to make that happen. So say I was to go and make one of these beautiful images happen, who owns it then? What's stopping someone else from taking it and using it elsewhere, especially if I've used it for a brand or in a piece of creative that's meant to be owned by Nike, for example. You had a beautiful runner up there. Who owns it once it's generated?
Yeah, I love that question, and the answer differs by channel. So today, a lot of what we've been talking about is our e-commerce channel. We don't have any exclusivity there, meaning if somebody licenses it, it's just like they licensed a direct piece of content. It's not exclusive for use, right? If a contributor uploads a photo directly to our site and multiple people want to purchase that, they can do that. One of the things that we're stepping into actively right now is how that story changes for our enterprise customers, businesses like Nike, who may want to have some sort of exclusivity around the outputs. Coming soon, we will have some packaging and some products in market that allow our enterprise customers to opt in to only have the content that they're generating be exclusively used by them. So definitely something that's top of mind for some of our larger enterprise customers.
Recently, there was a graphic novel that was written, and the author got rights to the text that she generated and style of it, but she did not get rights for the images that were AI generated. So anybody can use those images even though they were in her book.
We have 30 seconds. So let me spend these 30 seconds thanking all of you for coming today. I encourage you, if you have not already, to check out the Shutterstock booth. Shutterstock booth. You can actually go play with this technology there, put some prompts in, see what comes out. And if you have any other questions, there's a lot of people standing by to answer those. So thank you so much. Appreciate the time.